Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 349 of Humanity Rising on this 27th day of October. Over the last several months, as all of you know who've been tuning into our sessions, we've been focusing on the climate science that is swirling all around us in preparation for the Conference of Parties that starts next Monday in Glasgow, to which heads of states and scientists and major figures from around the world are traveling as the world takes counsel together at a time of code red, when we are now in the climate tipping point, which means that escalating ecological turbulence is no longer avoidable. So our societies, particularly our young people, are going to have to navigate a pathway at a time where chaos will be increasing inevitably and unavoidably all around us, in the face of which our governments will be less and less able to ensure the kind of stability that society and indeed civilization requires to flourish. And that's what Code Red means. And if you've been paying attention to the statements just of the Secretary General of the United Nations over the last couple of weeks, they are increasingly stern and stark about the need for collective action. So one of the meta themes of Humanity Rising has been, how do we, in this time of turbulence and the centrifugal force of chaos emanating out of the environment, how do we ensure sanctity? How do we create coherence? How do we create the kind of community that will enable us not only to gain comfort, but to gain healing and an equilibrium of heart and soul and mind that can enable us to create what Ilya Prigogine, the Nobel Prize winner in chemistry about 20 years ago, called islands of coherence in a sea of chaos. Today, we're going to go to the north of North America, to British Columbia, to a community called Clear Sky, which has been experimenting, informed by the Buddhist tradition, also informed by the integral theory of Ken Wilber, and the latest scientific data on how humans can engage in mindfulness at collective levels, to explore what right community, what coherence in community really means. How do you achieve it? And how do you use it as a model for attempts everywhere to ensure collective coherence in our time? So I want to now introduce some of the founding members. Catherine Sensei, who's a founding teacher of Clear Sky. Karen Mcallister, who's another founding member, who's now the chairman of the board. Duncan Kreil, another founding member who was chairman of the board from 2008 to 2014. And both Karen and Duncan teach mindfulness there at Clear Sky. And they prepared a very thoughtful program for us today, exploring the issues of community coherence in a time of Code Red. So Karen, Duncan, Catherine, I welcome you to Humanity Rising and turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. We're very excited to be here and to be sharing our 16-year journey of creating conscious community, which has been done many times before. And we're hoping today you can take away some freshest thinking or some new thought, or that you can go back and apply to your own community in these turbulent times. So before we begin, we start all our meetings, all our gatherings at Clear Sky with an opening prayer, and we bring in these 7 beautiful qualities into the room. And the first one is awareness, compassion, wisdom, strength, abundance, joy, and humor. And I'd like the whole Clear Sky community to open up their videos, and we have mudras associated with each one. So we'll join in together with awareness, compassion, wisdom, strength, abundance, joy, and humor. It keeps getting longer as the times get more challenging. So before I begin, I'm just going to pass it to Duncan to do a quick mindfulness so that we can bring ourselves totally into the space together.
Okay, hi everyone, we're delighted to be here. So just take a moment wherever you are, just finding your posture. If you're sitting on a chair, or wherever you're standing or sitting, just closing your eyes for a moment. Just feel the weight and the warmth of your body, feel the connection to the ground. And just invite you to take 3 deep breaths just to arrive and settle. So breathing in deeply, filling your lungs with fresh air, energy. Long, slow exhale, just letting your body settle, ground. Breathing in deeply. Long exhale, just grounding, settling. Breathing in deeply. And a long exhale, just letting your body relax, settle, center. And just resting in your breath for a few moments. Feeling the weight, warmth of your body grounded. Just allowing yourself to become present, to put aside whatever else is going on in the day. Allowing yourself to come on this journey together, exploring conscious community, conscious awakening community. So as you sit and breathe, just bringing your attention around your heart area. Just imagining a warm light in that area. So bringing a warm, friendly, rose-colored light in that area. And imagine that extending out, filling your body. Just wishing for yourself that you be well and happy, healthy, connected. And then just extending that feeling around to other people on this call, all the people in the different areas of the planet joining for this session. Feeling their breathing, their hearts all together. And just sending that warm, kind feeling, friendly feeling, wishing we're all well, healthy, connected. And then lastly, just sending that friendly, warm light across the planet to all humans, creatures, birds, animals, insects, whatever beings live here and make this their home. Wishing that we're all well and healthy, awakening, connected. And coming back to your body and feeling the weight, the contact with the ground, resting in your breath. And then opening your eyes, having a stretch, and coming back together.
Thank you, Duncan. Just a few land acknowledgements and honoring of those that have gone before us, that has got us here to this place called Clear Sky. So Clear Sky is situated in the unceded territory of the Tsanaha Nation, of which we are guests on this land, and we take our environmental stewardship very seriously, and the Clear Sky members will be probably in there, as we converse, it'll probably end up in the conversation in many places, I expect. And then just paying homage to all our lineage, where the awakened mind has been transmitted from person to person, dating back 2,500 years ago to now. And so none of us could be here but for the grace of our teachers and those that have walked the path before us and has transmitted to each one of us. Clear Sky was founded in 2004 by Catherine Sensei and Qapel. Qapel is not here today with us, but Catherine Sensei is. Hello, Catherine Sensei. And we're all here at Clear Sky right now. And before I go into a little bit about Clear Sky, I'd like to have everyone introduce themselves, beginning with our beloved Sensei. And just a little bit about how did you get here? You know, who are you and what's your role at Clear Sky and how did you get here? And keeping it short and simple because we want to get into our co-creation of cutting edges in money, sex, and power and all that great stuff that's very important in order for us to be of service to the world in its troubling times. So, Catherine Sensei, how did you get here?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Humanity Rising, for having us, and welcome everybody. This is exciting. I was born in the US and raised there. And as soon as I became an adult, I started traveling and have traveled to many different countries. Most notably, I lived in Japan for 20 years, where I met our teacher, Qapel. And I also lived in the Brazilian Amazon and now live in Canada here at Clear Sky. So this has been a very important part of my shaping and my learning, is to explore this beautiful planet firsthand and meet its people and learn about this amazing place that we live. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Sensei. Yes, Sensei is a very special person for me because she's been really spearheading the way as a Buddhist teacher and an awakened being, and I'm very proud and very happy to have her here because there are a few role models in women spiritual mentors in our world today that and I just feel incredibly honored and grateful that I do have an excellent role model in this. So my name is Karen Mcallister. I'm chair of the board of Clear Sky and director of fund development. I'm the money person, the money bags, but I'm the money bags from not just the numbers. I deal with people's emotional and psychological states around money, and we will be talking about the importance of that in conscious community. I live here with all this gang, this beautiful gang, a gang of warriors of the awakened mind. I'm just dying to share what we've learned over the last 16 years. So I'll stop there and hand it over to Mr. Duncan Crabbe.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. So I also live at Clear Sky and was involved back from the beginning. Met Catherine Sensei and Qapel in Japan years ago when I was working there. And wow, it's been a great, awesome ride for the last 20 years of learning and transformation and a lot of deep lessons and hard lessons. That's great learnings. So I was the former chair here, helped kind of run the community. And then I have a kind of day job as an executive. And then within that context, I was one of the pioneers of the IBM mindfulness movement. And I'm currently running a global mindfulness program at my current company. So I'm very interested in exploring how we can take some of the lessons from our community here in our center here and bring those into the business and nonprofit world, and how can those sort of help transform how we work. So that's me.
Great. So Maureen, it's Maureen Smith.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here too. Thanks for the invitation and lovely to be with you all today. I've lived at Clear Sky for 16 years and I'm here because I was out for lunch one day with Catherine Sensei and Qapel, and they said, hey, we need a caretaker for our retreat center. Why don't you come on over? And that was just good timing for me. And I love that question of how did you get here? Because it's kind of a funny story. You never know what's going to happen over a lunch conversation. 16 years later is the best decision I ever made. I grew up in Canada, so I'm not that far from the home turf. And now I'm working locally at as an addictions counselor in a local community. And I'm the lead person in charge of the land, the infrastructure, the facilities at Clear Sky. And having quite a ball of it all. Thanks to my teachers and community.
Thank you, Maureen. Over to Cara, Ava, and Richard. Cara.
Hi there, everybody. My name's Cara. I was born in New Zealand, way down in the South Pacific, and my mother's from Singapore. So I actually grew up New Zealand, Singapore, Japan, and then as soon as I could leave New Zealand, I was off and went to Asia, lived in China, and then Japan, and that's where I met our teachers, Sensei and Qapel in Kyoto. And then after a couple of years studying there, I thought, why not come to Canada and help out at this new retreat center called Clear Sky? And so I ended up here in 2008. And then I became the farm manager, one of the groups starting the farm here at Clear Sky. And we have a food forest, and we had a garlic farm for a few years. So we're really trying to bring in sustainability on site here at the center. And then after that, I studied acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and I'm just a couple years ago moved back here, and I practice Chinese medicine and acupuncture in Cranbrook, the local town about 30 minutes outside of Clear Sky, and I live at Clear Sky as well. It's lovely to be here.
Thanks so much, Cara. Ava.
Hello. So my name is Ava, and I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada, a little bit closer than some of the other folks here. And I really ended up here, was doing the mainstream and doing the mainstream well, had the job and the education and everything, and was just very dissatisfied with concerned about the future of our planet, and kind of at a make or break point in my own life, and through a series of very fortuitous events, ended up at Clear Sky for a retreat. And it was actually after my second retreat here that Qapel and Sensei dropped the idea of maybe staying here for a couple more months. And I thought, okay, I'll stay for 2 months and then I'll know everything I need to know about life and I can move on. And then that didn't happen, and it turned into 6 months, which turned into a year, which is now, I've discovered, turned into a lifelong journey, which I'm very grateful for. So that was in 2016. I'm at Clear Sky as the marketing and community manager. And I came here in marketing as a career, and through a lot of the wonderful depth shadow work that we do here, I most recently have become a somatic sex educator. I just started my own business, Awakening Lovers, and which really focuses on, we spend so much time on technology in our minds, and so it's really getting into the body and using somatic coaching as a modality for sexual exploration. So that's me. Over to Richard.
Ava and Richard.
Hello, my name is Richard. I was born in Japan near Tokyo, and grew up in Chicago, and now I live in Canada. Who would have thought? I went to university at Temple University, Japan, and while I was there in Japan, I started going to local Dharma classes, and then I just knew, this is the teaching. And I came over to Clear Sky in November 2018 for the 3-month intensive program, and I'm currently the assistant manager of personal retreats here at Clear Sky, and I also assist with training new participants in the 3-month intensive program. So thank you, Humanity Rising, for hosting us today.
Thank you, Richard. So you will have got a flavor of Clear Sky through those beautiful introductions. When Duncan and I were talking to Jim yesterday, he said, why did you guys call Clear Sky Clear Sky? And Qapel and Sensei named it Clear Sky because it represents the blissful, non-clinging, aware mind. And that's always present in us behind the ever-shifting clouds of our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings. And this is the beautiful mind that pays attention to the detail. And this is the beautiful mind that's conscious, that's aware, that's kind. And that's what we do here. We apply that mind, that blissful, non-clinging, aware mind to everything we do, and particularly in our activity here at Clear Sky. So maybe get up the slide about what Clear Sky is, and then I'm going to pass it on to Catherine Sensei. So yeah, Clear Sky certainly is a place. It's a residential monastery here. We have about 11 people on site all year round, but it's an international community that come and be with us at certain times a year for a retreat. So it's a space for inner and outer growth, and it's a living lab. And I'm going to hand over to Catherine Sensei in a few minutes. It's a laboratory to practice the teachings of awakening. And it's a supportive space to do, not only do we do meditation, but study, and then it is the path of service. We believe that, for the Westerner, because we're so busy and so active every day, that we do believe that one of the quick, fast, liberative paths to awakening is through the path of selfless service. And then what we really are unique is we're on about liberating the shadow, liberating the lower chakras, so that we can be in the heart and be in a state of loving kindness and compassion, having all those areas cleared up. So we're really about co-creating cutting-edge approaches to society, money, and the environment. And this has been spearheaded by Qapel and Catherine Sensei. And so, Catherine Sensei, here's the question for you: How did we get to having Clear Sky be? How do we end up co-creating these cutting-edge approaches to society, money, and the environment? And a little bit about the journey, because it's been very interesting. When we started off, people, when they heard about meditation, it was like, oh, what do you do? And how relevant is that? But now it's very relevant, and what we're doing is very relevant. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, sure. Happy to, Karen. Let's see. Well, we founded Clear Sky in the very beginning. We really just wanted a place where we could meditate for longer periods of time. We were having challenges finding such a place in Japan, ironically, where we could go at various times throughout the year for various lengths of time to do meditation retreats. And so we looked for land in Japan, and the bubble era was still kind of hanging around. So things were expensive, things were noisy. We weren't Japanese, so that created some challenges. So we started looking in North America as well, and found this property and fell in love with it. And we bought it as a foundation together. We raised enough funds to place a down payment. And we kind of thought, okay, now we can meditate all the time or as much as we want. And within about a year, it slowly dawned on us that wasn't true, that we'd actually started a business, which none of us wanted to do. None of us were interested in that. And we kind of thought, oh no, what have we done? And so, but there we were. So we started. That was the beginning of what our teacher Qapel sometimes says: if you want to become more than you are, you have to become what you're not. And so we realized a lot of us had a kind of aversion to business, because we had decided not to go out and make a lot of money, for example, that we decided instead to honor our inner life, honor the spiritual life. And so there's this sense of kind of turning away from something like business in order to be a spiritual person. And we realized we had all of these concepts, all these views that say being a spiritual person was good and being a business person is bad. And that's so obviously untrue. And yet we had to reconcile this inside ourselves by actually becoming both ourselves. And so this led to what Karen is now a real specialist in, of integrating all of our issues and challenges and views around money, which is such a powerful substance, and one that a lot of spiritual practitioners just don't deal with it as a way of dealing with it. And that has limited efficacy. And Karen's really the best qualified to speak to this, so I'll leave it there for now. And really, this center has been such a great thing for us because it has really forced us to walk our talk, to live our spiritual practice 24/7, 365, because we have really encountered and continue to encounter just about every problem you can think of, every challenge that you can think of. And it's really forced us to become resourceful and form partnerships with other people who know subjects better than we do, so that we can learn from them and then exchange. And most of all, to really live our spiritual practice, really rely on our spiritual practice, because at the end of the day, so much comes down to, can we be kind? Can we be compassionate? And can we be wise? And those are really skills. Those are really, really high level skills that spiritual practice allows us to cultivate. And then the center and the world and our lives are the proving ground for how we're doing, and to help us get better. It's the dojo. So that's the living lab. It's an ongoing experiment and an exciting one. And we're so, I think I speak for all of us when I say we're so pleased and so honored to be able to do this together. And maybe we'll see some of the people on this call sometime to join in the adventure.
Yay. Thank you, Catherine Sensei. Catherine Sensei, everybody's talking about wanting to be in community, right? And so what is conscious awakening community as opposed to just a community? Like what, and why does it matter?
Gosh, well, community, one of the amazing things about community is that it will push every single button that you have, even buttons that you didn't know that you have, you'll discover by living in community. And we have to learn how to, in Buddhist language, we have to learn how to transcend that, how to be able to have our buttons pushed until it doesn't really matter if they get pushed anymore, because we've seen that so many times and are okay with it. And we can extrapolate, right? What we do here in conscious community, 12 of us year round, and that number fluctuates because people outside of COVID in particular come to do retreats, so our numbers expand and in season. But we can extrapolate what happens here in this community happens wherever we go, right? Whoever we're with in the moment is our community. And the entire world, the entire planet, and in fact, the entire universe is our community. So how are we showing up? How are we doing our part to try to help it to go well? How can we do that? And then where do we practice? So I think we talk a lot about this living lab, of it being an intentional community. It's a very experimental community. We're always trying new things because we don't claim to have the answers. So we just try something else. If it works, we keep it and try and improve on it. It doesn't work, we try something else. Does that answer your question, Karen?
Yeah.
Would you like to pursue that further?
Yeah, it does. I guess what makes it, we can experiment a lot because we are a small community, right? And we don't intend to be a big, large one either, right? We want to keep it kind of small because then we can really experiment. Yeah, thank you, Sensei. I'm just going to leave it there and then pass it on to Maureen Smith and ask Maureen, like you've been in conscious community, you've been living here from the very beginning. And so what is conscious community to you and why does it matter? The same question I asked Sensei.
Thanks for asking. For me, this started way back when I was a young person. And I would go to parties with my friends, and everyone seemed to have a good time, and I had an okay time. And but they were talking about things that didn't kind of resonate with me. They were all kind of going to marry their childhood sweethearts and talking about their careers and their jobs and their homes and setting up house and stuff. And that all seemed fine, but it just didn't juice me the way it juiced my friends, you know? And so week after week and month after month and year after year, I kept kind of going, what am I missing? What's going on? Where is it that I would fit, or what am I looking for? And I found that setting up a home for just me didn't do it for me, but setting up a home, a monastery for other people that have vision like me does it for me. That really kind of makes my life worth living. And so when I sweep the floors, I sweep for everybody. And when I do the dishes, I do it for everybody's benefit. And that for this being works. And the thing about this community, this conscious awakening community, works because it's everything Sensei just said about the kind of discipline and the learning and the being authentic and the buttons pushing, you know. It's not because we're just hanging out together. It's not a spa, contrary to some people might think that. I don't know, but it's trying to be really aware every moment and prioritizing our growth and our awakening in everything we do, you know. And of course we don't all see eye to eye all the time, but we do agree on the core mission and values and the kind of why we're here, that awakening drive. And that's what holds us together enough so that we can figure out that when we can't see eye to eye and the buttons are pushed. So the awakening conscious community is like prioritizing the practice over my life, my personal life. And I was thinking, you know, it's like if a family is a group that you're kind of born into and you don't choose, but then as you grow up, you can choose whether you want to continue to be with that family, that group of people. Well, this is kind of the same. We didn't choose these individuals to do conscious community with, but we did choose the teachers, and we did choose the lineage, and we did choose the teachings, and that's kind of the point, and that's what makes it work. And that's so important for some of us. Yeah, I hope that kind of takes you somewhere.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Maureen. Thank you. I'm going to have a look at what a supportive container, or co-creating a supportive container like we are, called Clear Sky. I'm going to hand it over to Duncan now to talk about the components of that refuge in something greater than ourselves, and to speak about how that works.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Yeah, so in a moment, we're going to sort of dive into some of the sort of practices we do in terms of service and generosity and shadow and so on. And yeah, we just wanted to say a few words. We found just the importance of having a kind of container for doing the work with the community in the center. We found a real valuable lesson. We think it's useful to kind of look at how you might apply that in your own communities and lives. So just want to share a couple of ideas, because this was a bit of a discovery for us along the way. I'll bring up the slides. Hopefully these, you can see these okay. So just want to share. This is a quote from an Irish poet. So in this postmodern world, the hunger to belong has rarely been more intense and more urgent. And with many of the ancient traditional shelters now in ruins, it's as if society has lost the art of fostering community. So I think, as Catherine Sensei alluded to at the beginning, we were all quite a sort of individual doing our paths, and we really discovered the intense support of a community, of just a kind of cradle of being here. A related quote, this is from our teacher's teachers, Namdra Rinpoche. So he talks about two liberations: Cheto Vimutī, liberation of the heart; Panya Vimutī, liberation of insight or wisdom. And that in order to work on these liberations, that side of retreat, there's further work we must do, create a supportive container. So just like a baby is supported in the womb, grown-ups need to live in a supportive setting, especially if they desire to follow the spiritual life. So we found this a very deep reflection because it's, as people have described, when we're working with our blind spots and conflicts and big transformations, we really need this container of community and place. So we kind of unpack that here. So first of all, this idea of a strong container supports growth and transformation, and it's particularly in our distracted, very challenged world, we feel that's more and more important. And also that outer clarity can support the inner clarity. So if we can work on our communities, our environments, really honoring those and setting those up in a clear, supportive way, that can really help us keep in balance and to go deeper. And lastly, we sort of unpack this. So there's the key work of working with teachers, the kind of teachings or whatever practices we follow. There's the community we practice with. And what we found is a bit of a missing element, as particularly in the kind of modern world, is the container or the environment this happens in. So a lot of spiritual work in the past might have happened in a monastery or convent, and now we've sort of taken that, but we're living in cities. We're distracted. We're on social media all the time. So it's kind of like a leaky bucket. So we've kind of we won't have time to go here, but we sort of unpack this into 5 principles of just how do you create that supportive space. So kind of looking at the space, looking at the structures and routines, the rhythms, looking at how we communicate, looking how we work together, cleaning up our shadows around money, sex, power, and so forth. So these are kind of a high level, a few sort of ideas we played with. And I just wanted to ask Catherine Sensei first, what's been your experience here, Catherine, in terms of the importance of a container for the kind of work that we do here? And what lessons have you learned from that?
That's a great question, Duncan. Thanks. Well, one of the definitions of a fully enlightened being in Buddhism, in Theravadan Buddhism, is that the inside and the outside are the same. And so I think, Duncan, you talked just now very nicely about the inner clarity and the outer clarity supporting one another. And we could say for sure they do support one another on a practical level. They also mirror one another. So in that sense, if we meditate and we have a beautiful experience, how do we manifest that in our environment? And we can look at that in the kind of immediate environment. How do we manifest that in our room, or take it out? How do we manifest that in our center? How do we manifest that in our society? And how do we manifest that on the planet? And I think that's the amazing challenge that we're all facing, as Jim described in his welcoming message today, right? As spiritual practitioners, how are we going to show up at this pivotal time in our planet's history? And I love the fact that we can use clear sky as our demonstration area, right? And look forward to it developing further. Everyone who comes brings a new answer to that question or a new direction to that manifestation. And that's a really cool thing about living in community is how everyone manifests a different facet of the gem.
Thank you, Sensei. And maybe for the next topic, we'll just ask one story from the community in terms of that sort of principle of the container. Richard, would you like to say something about this? What's been your experience?
Sure, thank you, Duncan. Well, I'll give you the short answer. Life is suffering, first noble truth. So even breathing is a struggle, but I don't get down because, I breathed 10,000 times a day. So it's not like, this is agonizing, but it's all about the view. And Clear Sky is a community for awakening. And it was that way before the COVID-19 pandemic, and now, and will continue to be. And just the awakened teachers, awakening community is key. And sometimes I refer to the outside world as ego land, because everyone's an ego and interacting with a bunch of other egos, and just the lack of awareness. It's creates a real struggle for everyone. And with community, we know that isolation just doesn't work. It's in Vancouver, that's the number one problem, people feeling they're isolated, and it's exacerbated now with the pandemic. And one of the strengths of being in a conscious awakening community is, even if me or one other person or two other people, they're having an off day, everyone else, their state will be high. So kind of people supporting other people. And that's a lot harder to do if you're by yourself, if you're single, or, you know, nuclear family, or in a relationship, you know, the baby starts crying, the wife has a headache, you forgot the milk, you know, it's chaos, right? Yeah, so the world runs on greed, hatred, delusion, and here we're all about kind of naming the state that has no state beyond it: awareness, compassion, wisdom, strength, and abundance. Yeah, we do meditation, karma yoga, study, service. And the key thing here is we're always reminded of the absolute view. The view is so important. This idea that of shunyata, which means emptiness. So the teachers often say, well, what's wrong with this moment? Well, nothing. Nothing's wrong.
Yeah. So Richard, yeah, I guess you're speaking to the support of the container of just kind of holding the space. And particularly in the pandemic, that's a great point, right? It's been a really troubled times. I think we've noticed, would you say, how resilient the community and the space has been with pandemics? Or
yeah, it's made it a lot easier. You know, I couldn't just imagine, you know, living with another person or a small family in an apartment in a city. You know, it's we found leaning in. We realized the community, living in community, has its own resilience, which keeps our mental health and our heart well.
Yeah, so that's just one idea I want to share, sort of the importance of this container of holding and maybe looking in your lives and community where that could come. So I think now we want to turn to what some of the practices that help a kind of conscious awakening community actually work. How do we actually work together and work through conflicts and do stuff? So I hand back to Karen for this section.
Okay, great. Well, there's two core. We're going to talk a little bit about the core practices of how we work here at Clear Sky, and one of them is karma yoga, the path of action, or awakening in action. So karma is action, and yoga is union. So it's you know, bringing that beautiful attention to deep detail, that mindful aware mind to our activity, right? We found that you know, a lot of the practices that we have come from the East, and we have Western minds and we have busy minds. And so we have found, you know, it depends on the person's preponderance, but generally the Western mind really can liberate quite quickly to the path of selfless service. So that's one way we work. And the other way we work is that the whole culture is built on the culture of generosity, or otherwise known as dana, which is the Sanskrit or Pali word for generosity. And I always see dana or generosity as my pension plan. You know, my pension plan for my mental health and for my ability to be what I am not, actually, and to, you know, in the world today, because of the issues we have, little Karen ego is not going to be really of service if I'm not going to become what I am not, because it's just so complicated and so challenging on so many levels. So generosity and building a culture of generosity, whether that be not just financially, but giving my time and my energy to a cause greater than myself, frees me of some of my inner conflicts and my neurosis, and so that my whole energy is freed up so I can just be of service to people. So there are two core practices that we really focus in on at the center here. And yeah, so the question here is, how does that path of karma yoga, or path of service and generosity, bring profound learning and provide a generative model for working together as a community? So I'm going to open it up to whoever would like to. Oh, Catherine Sensei, would you like to go first, please?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I'd love to go first, and I'm gonna kind of pop the ball over the net back to you and Duncan, because I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this.
You popping over to me?
Oh my God.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's, I must admit, when I first came, as Catherine Sensei said at the beginning, I thought we were just making a meditation center and I was going to just go meditate, leave me alone. And I think the first summer we arrived, of course, it's half built, and Qapel said, do we have someone kind of managing activities around here? And I was sort of trying to look very small and hide. And he was like, Duncan, you take charge and organize what's happening for the retreat. And I was like, oh no. So I sort of figured I'd get it sorted in a few days and I could actually get to meditate. And of course, it took a bit longer than that and so on. But it was a huge learning because Qapel had me kind of working a few hours, organizing, and then meditating a few hours, sort of going back and forth. So it really helped me learn to bring the meditative state of mind, sort of the clarity and the question into all the activities. And then that was huge when I went back to kind of day job and livelihood in the city. There was much less division. So I think initially I'd found a big difference between my daily meditation and my daily work. So for me, the karma yoga or this awakening in action, it's a way of bridging the gap and being much more integrated. And then it's just juicy because if you're sitting on a meditation cushion, there's just a lot doesn't come up. But if you're working with people, you're doing things that maybe aren't your preference or your skill set, or things come up or conflicts, it just pushes all the buttons as we talked about earlier. So I gradually started realizing this was a huge learning thing. And then meditation was a great way of sort of integrating, but I started realizing karma yoga was just such a great path for integration and learning. So that's my thought. How's that, Catherine Sensei?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I'm from Ireland. I'm Irish originally by birth, and I inherited a lot of patternings around colonization by the English over 800 years, and colonization by the church. So I came to this path with a lot of suffering and really wanting freedom from it, and being subject to colonization. And so I had huge issues with authority. I had huge issues with power, coming from the culture I did. And if there's any Irish people out there, I invite you to really explore this, because it's something our country has not explored really. Somebody would, my mentor would tell me, a simple example of this would be, my mentor would ask me to do something. And, my patterning was, nobody tells me what to do. Right. And it was unconscious. And so, when she would ask me this, I would be, tending and doing my karma yoga, but would have all these mind states of, who does she think she is? And nobody tells me what to do. And slowly but surely, I would recognize these patterns that would be bringing me down and bringing me a lot of suffering. And I would say, Karen, just pay attention to the job. Of course, my mentor would be like, did you get the job done? Why didn't you get it done on time? Would it be, again, like I said, the awakened mind is about paying attention to the detail, to the right details. So in an ego framed mind, I used to pay attention to my neurosis. I used to pay attention to my feelings, my negative feelings, and the dialogue that I would have with her, rather than just getting the task done. But just getting the task done is like 10 years of bloody hard work, right? To be in a great, in the moment with just what is, right? And in a way, I feel like we're in this global crisis because our minds are having these dialogue with our inner conflict emotions and our negative views, right? Rather than, you have this task to do and just do that and use it like as if you were in the meditation cushion. Use it to bring the mind to blissful, non-clinging awareness, So that's been my path. And I'm happy to say that I have let go at this moment in time anyway. I've let go of a lot of my authority issues, which is super important to be a really good contributing team member. And in the planet and the state of the world is in today, you really need to be a contributing, positive member of the world. And so that means getting yourself out of the way. And to get yourself out of the way, join a community that triggers all your buttons and drives you mad. You know, and then you will see at the end of it loving kindness and compassion. You will feel it, you know, but not without doing the work. So karma yoga has been my path. Generosity, oh my God, generosity for me, coming from Irish culture, you know, deeply victimized culture who believes that anything and anybody is going to take advantage of us. Who had to work through that one, right? And open the heart and trust and give and work with these people. And with every spiritual tradition and with every community, it always starts with generosity, right? It's your pension plan, protection from greed, hatred, and delusion. You know, and I'll talk a little bit about money later on. So that's my spiel today. Does that work, Catherine Sensei?
In case it's not obvious, when Karen's talking about mentor, we're actually talking about Catherine Sensei here. Because one important thing here is, it's with community, it's in person. You're working with someone, right, who's calling you on the moment. And Catherine Sensei is a great genius at this kind of spotting where you might just be holding back or not very, very clear. So that's another big part of our path is actually having a live in-person mentor for these kind of things. Maybe we can ask another. Did you want to say more about Catherine Sensei, or maybe we could ask Kara or someone else as well for their sense? Yeah, Kara, how about what's your experience?
Yeah, gosh. For me, it feels a lot like, so I think I came into this community in my early 20s, and I was a pretty feisty, angry, know-it-all, quite arrogant. I really cared about the planet and the world. I really wanted the world to change. I was very concerned. I was a global citizen, but it was like, the world's got to change, and it's so messed up, right? And there was so much anger and pain in here. And I was kind of groomed in a way. I had a very kind of well-supported upbringing. I was kind of groomed to go work for the UN or, you know, that kind of thing. And eventually my inner state couldn't hold it. I was just too angry and too much pain. And so luckily I had too much pain, because I could have ended up going and working for the UN in that kind of negative state, right? Trying to get everybody else to fix things, and it's all out there. And I had no awareness of this, or very little awareness of this, or even awareness of my own body. It kind of sounds silly, but so the path of karma yoga and the community and having teachers and mentors, for me has been like just putting my body in the place and doing something to help that isn't about me, and just being there, even if it's sweeping the floor or raking the yard or transcribing a talk or something, whatever it is. It's just putting my body there, and then getting the kind of thick, icky, angry, tight, foggy, confused layers, just year after year, kind of worn down or kind of cleared. And after many years, it does get lighter and lighter. And it's to do with in the moment training. So just as I remember very early stories, so simple, just showing up at the Dharma house in Kyoto, and my job was to bring the rice for something. And, you know, the amount, I was in so much pain, I was just so kind of zoned out, right? I was living in this big head bubble. And I remember just in my head, I was like, oh, I can arrive late because it's my job to pick up the rice. So I arrived at like 9:15, right? And this is, you know, Dharma training, you're there at 9 or you're there at 8:55. So I kind of show up at 9:10. I think I'm quite a new student. So I'm a new student and I'm completely in my head. And then I arrive and I'm kind of putting my things away and everybody else is cleaning the house. And then the next thing I know, this arm comes behind me. Yeah. And it's like, and it was my teacher, it was Qapel. He said, "What are you doing?" You know, and it just like, it was like a lightning bolt through my body. It's like, wow. And it just woke me up. He said, you know, you're being like a kind of teenage girl who just thinks she can do whatever she likes and is oblivious to everybody else, right? And I think I probably cried afterwards and felt very shaken, but it's that kind of moment to moment training when you're doing the karma yoga, when you're doing the service, it shows up our pains and our patterns and our defense mechanisms. So in my case, the defense mechanism was kind of being in la la land, thinking I'm being a really nice person and I'm not offending anybody, because I was all nice on the outside but angry on the inside, right? So anyway, that's an example of training in the moment, right? And why the community and the teachers. So I think in terms of the world, it's really us being in communities where we are brave and strong enough and vulnerable enough with each other that we can call each other on our small little patterns in the moment that don't seem like a big deal, but are. That's how I think maybe we can save the planet.
That's kind of a nice linkage. I think that segues nicely to a topic we wanted to explore as well as part of this talk, which is this kind of shadow element, right? So as we work together as communities, these kind of issues come up and we call each other on things, and it can be quite triggering, right? Because it's going into issues around money and sex and power as the kind of shorthand we use, and can be quite sensitive. I think Kara's story illustrates nicely, right, how it can kind of touch sore spots. But yeah, we think this work is just so key for transformation and then actually being able to heal and serve the planet. So we'd love to hear some stories on that. Catherine Sensei, I guess first to ask you, why do you feel the work of integrating the shadow is so important?
Especially in community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the shadow. So when we talk about, we sometimes use the shadow and money, sex, and power a little bit interchangeably. It's, of course, there's more to the shadow than just money, sex, and power, but those tend to be the hot issues. And if you don't mind, I'll give a little bit of context for that, which is, if we look at, we can go at this from many different kinds of systems. We can go at it from contemporary psychology, for example, and the one I'll use right now is the chakra system. So if we look at the being as having 7 energy chakras, then money, sex, and power are shorthand for us for the first 3 chakras, the root, the second, and the third. And those are basic survival issues, basically, and very important for anyone's well-being to feel confident about survival and making one's way in the world. And they tend to be messy. Money, sex, and power tend to be kind of messy issues because our survival issues get triggered. And coming from the heart is much more beautiful. Living from the state of intuition and vision and connection with the cosmos are so exhilarating and fill us with awe in their sense of wonder. And we can have glimpses of that. But if we want to live with access to those beautiful states all of the time, which we really need to do in order to help the planet to flourish again, then our first 3 chakras need to be really healthy, because those are the ones that the other ones build on. And so it's very important to, what we call, integrate the shadow, be comfortable with issues around the shadow, to have explored all of the nooks and crannies of our own, all the skeletons in our own closets, our family closets, our racial closets, our national closets, and so on. so that we can show up as fully integrated human beings with, just imagine a visual of all of the energies flowing through those chakras freely, like a flow, like a mountain brook, and also being able to draw on whichever one is needed at the time, the energy from that center, whichever one's needed at the time. So that is one look at why integrating the shadow is so important. And I look forward to hearing everyone else's perspectives.
Thank you, Catherine Sensei, for that. Beautifully put. So yeah, I guess we want to hear a few stories on those categories you described: the money, the sex, and the power. And this is a bit of a focus for us in this talk, in that we think this is a real blocker for a lot of communities or spiritual groups or nonprofits and so on. These are areas that tend to interfere with their mission, or be areas, elephants in the room, that aren't often looked about. So want to spend a bit of time here. So I guess starting with money, Karen, this has really been your work. So I guess what's been your personal journey and experience, and what you've seen at Clear Sky that you could share that might be of interest to people around money shadow?
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Yeah, we really did a turnaround in our relationship with money around, actually, probably about 11 years ago now. And where we were just spending a lot of money. We were thinking we were doing well, but nobody was actually looking at revenue streams. I don't even think we knew how to budget, and we were meditators or spiritually oriented beings, and like Catherine said at the beginning, we resisted the idea that we actually had to become business people. So we were, I would say, more or less, I think, on the verge of going bankrupt if we continued the way we were going. So there was 3 of us in particular that were holding the financial, that were bringing in the revenue streams, that were bringing in the money, and there wasn't that much support for those 3 people bringing in the revenue stream, and there was sort of a dismissal, or a kind of not an avoiding, head in the sand. That's not, dealing with money or looking at the money thing is not spiritual, or and I would have to admit that money's sort of been hijacked in the world by say greed, hatred, and delusion in a way, right? And we as spiritual beings, or we as spiritual explorers, or people want to make a difference in the world, we actually contribute to that hijack by putting our head in the sand, or by having a somewhat dissociated relationship with money. And so this was very clear in our community very early on, and thanks to Catherine Sensei, where she's, listen, if you want to really have a great community, make sure you have a chief visionary officer, somebody who can see really 10 years, 20 years, 30 years beyond, and even more. That's really helpful, because a lot of times she bring ideas and we'll go, what? Do we have to? No, we don't believe you. And she ends up being right. So one of those was money. So we actually did some money therapy. We brought it to the organization, and everybody got to see what the relationship with money was. And it was a lot of the same, a lot of dissociative states, a lot of them, I can't be spiritual and embrace the money conversation too. And somehow I'm going to become something I'm not. I'm going to become this evil person, and that I'm going to have to let go of my values on some level, and all of that. So, when you bring these views up on the table, they're quite primitive. But if you don't bring them on the table, then they drive the organization, right? So, yeah, and it's meant nobody wants to talk about how much money they have in their bank account, or nobody, they'll talk more about their sex lives, which Ava will talk about next, more than they talk about their money lives, because money's to do with power and survival and so forth. So I have to admit that after we did this work, the organization got a lot more intimate. There was a lot more trust. There was an ability to actually argue and get into fights with each other with loving kindness and compassion, because we had tidied up our relationship with money. So money really, what we've learned is money is a reflection. It's not a measurement of who you are, which that's what the capitalistic model has created. We've taken on and adopted this very strange view that our net worth is equal to our self-worth. And so for us, we just see it as a measurement. We see it as a reflection of the areas that we have to work on, especially around it's just a great doorway into cleaning up some of the areas of giving and receiving and offering and taking and those beautiful practices. So I think I'll leave it at that. Does that?
Okay. Yeah.
And we started here. We just started here with the organization, and then other holistic centers, other meditation centers heard of our work with money. We're really thrilled about it, so started asking us to do some money work in their organizations too. So it's pretty really great to be co-creating cutting edges in the money field in the psychological, emotional side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. It's definitely been very juicy stuff. So then let's talk about, I guess, the shadow around sex, so sex, identity, relationship, and so on. This is obviously a big thing in all of our lives. It's such a powerful energy, and particularly in community. And then power we'll go to afterwards. So Ava, a bit similar to Karen, I guess you've got a career out of looking at these issues as a somatic sex educator. So what's been your journey, or and I should just mention too, if you want to be putting questions, this is a lot of juicy stuff. If you want to put questions in the Q&A or the chat, we'll be coming to those later. So Ava, yeah, what's been your journey, or what would you like to share about this area of the shadow?
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Yeah, what really landed for me, I loved when Sensei said previously about that cultivating fully integrated human beings. And that just really jumped out to me. It's such a beautiful phrase. And I have been reflecting recently about how, our whatever is a sort of shadow element around sexuality shows up and permeates pretty much all our other areas of life. It may not look the exact same, it can look the inverse, but it's still going to be showing up, and really speaks to the power of exploring the shadow that comes up around sexuality. And one of the principles at Planet Dharma, which is Qapel and Sensei's, their online virtual monastery, so to speak, where you can access a lot of their teachings there. And one of the principles is about supporting those more experienced than you, which really speaks to the service element here at Clear Sky. And it was through getting to do a lot of service for Sensei and speaking with her about just some of my blocks around sexuality. And well, I didn't see it as blocks, actually. Let's rewind. At the time, I didn't see it as a block. I was just, it's like everything in life is quite structured, career, And so for me, sexuality was just quite airy, fairy, and just bliss and and wasn't really looking at anything around it. And it was through speaking with her about that she suggested I introduce structure into my personal explorations, which to me sounded like the least interesting thing on the planet. I thought that was not interested at all, but listening to those more experienced than you, I thought that I would explore that and not only realize that everything has structure. Meditation has a structure. You set a timer and you focus on the breath, and that you can really get some really beautiful insights from that. And it was through that modality that it led me to this career change and really a very deep passion about working with people in this way. And so I just wanted to just share one story about some of the ways that it can really permeate so many areas of life. And so for me, I would say, so one of the things that the teachers use as a modality for exploring the shadow at Clear Sky is called the challenges. And so you can have like a weekly challenge, which is just sort of disrupting your routine. You can have a monthly challenge, which is something you've always thought about but never quite get to, or a yearly challenge, which can be something that seems absolutely terrifying and I'm never going there. And for me, so through doing this work, I just realized that there was areas of my own sexuality that I really wasn't looking at, things that I always thought, yeah, I'm interested in that, but I just don't need to look there. I don't need to go there. And it was through using the challenges system that I really so doing a challenge was something that I thought was just, that would be, I didn't realize that it was a challenge for me, so to speak. It was like, I'm just not interested in going there. And oftentimes the things that maybe don't seem interesting, there can be some juicy pieces there. So it was through doing that exploration that I realized that it was actually a huge challenge, and that it really came down to this immense fear of taking up space. And through realizing my own discomfort about showing up, such as in formats like this, that by not taking up space, I also wasn't actively receiving. And it then, got more and more deep and intricate. And by not receiving, then I wasn't fully then surrendering or trusting the universe. I wasn't allowing myself to receive in all areas of life, financially, receive support from the community. I didn't fully trust the community. And so it was just from doing one really essentially very simple challenge, it's just had this beautiful blossoming out that has not only been incredibly enriching for my life, but then it, like I said, it helps me show up more full-heartedly, open-heartedly in the community, which then is going to have ripple effects for how effective we all are in what we're doing here. So does that answer I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but
yeah, I think so. Thank you. I wish we had more time. We can delve into all of these stories, but hopefully Karen's sharing and Abby's stories give you a sense, building what Kata Sensei was saying, just the importance or the power of the work of trying to make these things conscious and really approaching them in a clear way, which is often taboo subjects, but it's really liberating. I see there's a few questions in the chat, and keep putting those in. We'll come in a moment. First, we just want to talk a little bit about then power. We have a few minutes, and I mean, this is all sorts of areas from hierarchy, conflict, gender relations, race, so on. So Mo, Cora, Richard, would one of you like to, or a couple of you like to speak on your personal journeys or observations around power and how that looks in community?
Sure, I can speak to that, Duncan.
Go ahead, Richard.
Well, first of all, you need to give the power and surrender to the awakened mind, not the ego. Put the horse before the cart. And yeah, power is so messy, and it's so important to integrate power and being aware of it, because it's everywhere. Like, you can live without money, you can live without sex, sure, but power, it's completely unavoidable. Yeah, because we live in a world of egos, and there's the individual and the collective. You have the government, get your vaccine or you can't go out to your favorite restaurants. So that's like a power, right? So what do you do? Yeah, when one person speaks, another person has to listen. Even eating, like, there's power involved, because that's taking life from an animal or plant or what have you. And when you're eating, that means another person isn't eating. So what I find is the key thing here is awareness. So my background, I'm African American and Japanese, and with African American history, there's slavery, and yeah, there historically lack of power, and you don't revolt, you do what you're told, or you get whipped or worse, right? And then being Japanese, it's very people are very sensitive to hierarchy, and whether you're talking to your superiors or so-called inferiors, the language, the way you speak, even, it completely changes. And hundreds of years back, if you disobeyed, then it's off with your head, right? So that's recognizing and being aware of kind of the conditioning that shows up for me, and what we all have. And so I get this training like, oh, Richard, you're afraid of getting into trouble. And then one day I recognize like, I'm afraid of getting into trouble because, you know, just the history of, and the conditioning, and, you know, it's still an issue today. Like, you know, if a white person gets into trouble, that's like a slap on the wrist, maybe probation. And, you know, if a Black person gets into trouble, that's, you know, 30 years in jail. So the big picture view is, I mean, in some ways it can't be resolved, like, because just the relative world, things are always impermanent. They're always changing. Either one person has the power and the other person doesn't. So yeah, it's not personal, even if it's personal.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Thanks for the beautiful sharing. I think that really shows just how deep and sensitive and complex these topics are. There's some questions in the chat will just come through at the end. Is there anything else anyone, Qapel Sensei or anyone in the Clear Sky team wants to say on the shadow topic or any of these themes?
Thanks, Duncan. I'd like to briefly mention a topic that we did write about a bit more in our book, Wasteland to Pure Land, which is on the topic of power, the concept of self-sovereignty, where each individual is sovereign in your unique way of showing up in the world. It's a privilege that each of us have, and it's a responsibility that each of us have. How we respond to whatever life brings us, how we show up in the world. And there's like Richard alluded to, there's so many things that we can't control. There's lots of things we maybe don't want to. I'm quite happy to stop at red stoplights and stop signs and so on, right? My sense of power is not threatened by that, but there's lots of things that do or could threaten one's sense of power. And it's just a profound meditation that I invite people to explore, is this concept of self-sovereignty. Thanks.
Thank you, Qapel Sensei. And I'll just pop the name of the book. A couple of people are asking. There's a place you can get on the website. You can get a free chapter or buy there. So kind of closing, we've talked about these different themes of the conscious community, the container that holds this, the
trainers and mentors,
the karma yoga, or the learning through action, the generosity, the shadow. These are sort of some of the themes. I guess sort of wrapping up, maybe Qapel Sensei what's a few thoughts on how all this comes together? How is this a model that can help other communities or organizations or people? How do we think this can really help in the healing and transformation for societies and the planet?
Well, I think it's like a probiotic or a yogurt culture, Duncan, where we really hope that the experiments that we've engaged with here are ones that can be replicated elsewhere, adapted to other people's situations and environments and so on, and improved upon and taken to scale. And one of my favorites, as you know, is what we've done with the ecology here at Clear Sky. We've done a lot of habitat restoration here. And it's amazing what a small group of people that really doesn't know what they're doing can accomplish when we try. So we weren't from this environment. We didn't know much about the environment. We didn't know anything about ecological restoration, but it was something that was important to us. And we talked to people who did know more than we did about it and tried our best. And health of the ecosystem here has really improved dramatically in 10 years. From 10 years ago, people would come here and say, oh, your land's in really bad shape. And now people come and say, it's really healthy and looks great. So I'm very hopeful about, imagine if everybody on this call tried to do something similar, even just in your yard or your little boxes that you hang on the window if you live in an apartment, or if you have a garden. That would definitely make a difference. So I encourage everybody, it can be in the realm of ecology, or it can be in whatever field is close to your heart. Feel confident that you can make a difference and enjoy the exploration, and find like-minded people to enjoy it together with.
Thank you, Sensei. Well, we're coming to the last 10 minutes, and I think we can open for questions.
Yeah, there were quite a few questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Did you want to go there?
Sure.
So, for example, Larry is asking, can someone speak more on the fear of power, for example? Who would like to take that one? Kata Sensei, would you like to say anything on fear of power?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Maureen to speak to that one.
Okay. Passing the ball. Maureen.
I'm afraid. I think one of the stories that was coming to mind thinking about this is my fear of deep childhood, ongoing whole life fear of showing up, and how it's a real kind of ducking of power. And I love what Sensei said about we all have a responsibility and privilege to show up, basically, right, in our best self. And one of the amazing ways that we learn to do this at Clear Sky is some of the stories you've heard. People having the opportunity to step into places that's really difficult and challenging for them, and to show up in new ways. And I think we started off the conversation talking about being meditators that weren't interested in running a business or doing money well, and you can't. You have to become something that you aren't if you want to be different than you are. And kind of looking at our own power issues and our ducking of power and being powerful together. And I mean, we just don't have enough time to dig into any of these things really, but it's certain that this laboratory is certainly a wonderful place to get muddy in with other people.
Great, thanks, Maureen.
Yeah.
And another question here on money from Linnea. I'd like to hear more, maybe Karen, you can pick this one up, more on your views about money, looking at the whole just new economy and our attitude to it right now. So how can some of the shadow or explorations you talked about at Clear Sky in the lab, how does that apply out to our economy and the bigger picture?
Right. Well, I like what Catherine Sensei was talking about, the chakras. And the one below the heart area, the solar plexus, is the place of creativity, right? And we're amazingly creative human beings. I mean, we got an electric car at Clear Sky. We're with the times, but creativity comes and is enhanced by having cleaned up our shadow. And so the first thing with looking at an alternative economy is actually doing the work of cleaning up your inner attitudes around money, because like anything, if you clean up your house, then you have given space to the creative mind to come up with alternative solutions to behaving and creating new forms of economy. So money is something we're not taught about managing our emotions around. I think somebody had a question about emotions. And so it's like a stockpile of dust bunnies in the closet. Catherine said they talked about closet. We have a huge shadow and lots of dust bunnies in the closet around money. So it's about opening that, or coughing sweeping it all out. And it's as simple as gathering people around a table and talking, having a conversation. What's your relationship with money? And it can, the views are amazing, like things like, well, I have to really, really, really work hard to get it. Oh, money and me, I don't see eye to eye. And well, I hand it over to my spouse or the financial admin or the fundraiser or the teachers of an organization. They can deal with that. And a lot of the inherited patterns are coming from, our great grandparents, coming from the pre-war periods before World War II. It's not ours, yet we don't get it out on the table and talk about it. So before looking, what was the question before?
I'll just bring it here, looking at the impact on the new economy.
Yeah, so again, the work is cleaning up our hearts and minds around these this thing that we call money. And money, what did it ever do in us? We created it and we dump all this projections onto it, and then we don't talk about it. So let's begin there. And that's what we did at Clear Sky. And, it's interesting when we talk about generosity because, in Christian terms, it's all about, giving to others. And what we say, giving to the others, but not at the expense of yourself. So it's like, how are your personal finances? And, do you have a pension? Have you got a budget? Are you spending between, very practical. We make sure that all the people in our community are very oriented to a very sane financial plan and that they're following it. And if they're not, why not? And so even the Karma Yoga program, we don't, many centers have these programs where a lot of young people come in. But what we do differently is that we make sure that they've got $2,000 or $3,000 in savings so that they don't come here with a lot of their issues that they're trying to deal with and then have no way of getting out. So just some simple things like that, right? But yes, I would begin with us first.
Well, thank you, Karen. Well, I guess we're pretty much coming close to time. There were some more questions, so we'll just invite you. Will we give your email or something? If people have follow-up questions?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll put our websites in the chat and Karen's email as well. So we're very happy to take sort of follow-up questions and explore more. And please feel free to connect with us. Have a look at Sensei and Qapel's book, Wasteland to Pure Land, covers a lot of these topics in depth as well. And
yeah, if any of the Clear Sky team would like to join the 30 minutes after where everybody's gathering, please do. Some of us have to get off and do other work now, Clear Sky, but yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining. And Jim, I see you're back there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what would you like to add here?
Well, I have one burning question.
Go ahead.
Having talked about sex, money, and power, which have plagued human beings across culture and across time for many thousands of years, I want to ask about the relationship between your Buddhist orientation and integral theory. And I'd like to start with you, Catherine, because I think that's fascinating interweaving that you're doing there at Clear Sky. And I understand from your biography, Catherine, that you were kind of ordained into kind of the Buddhist tradition, but the bringing in of integral theory is a really an innovative and, in my mind, very positive synthesis. So I would love to hear, I know it's a vast subject and we don't have very much time, but I would love to hear how that idea arose and how you're really understanding the synthesis between the two.
Sure. Well, I believe the idea arose when our teacher Qapel read Integral Spirituality, and it was a bit of a thunderbolt for him, and it really helped clarify something that we had struggled with quite a lot up until that date, and which we've sort of been describing in different terms, which is the difference between states and stages. And we do go into this in our book, Wasteland to Pure Land. So what Buddhism and meditation are just outstanding at, just really, really extraordinary cultivation of beautiful states of being. And that's the loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom that we talk about. But what historically Buddhism has not addressed so much or so well is the stages. So we saw this showing up in particular at our center when, for example, some people did not want to recycle, or some people didn't want to deal with sex or money, or some people didn't really understand why we would engage with ecological restoration. And they say, what does this have to do with meditation, and why does it matter? And I think that's where the stages really shine in their importance and their value. And so we have really tried to cultivate both beautiful states and hopefully ever increasingly high. Well, it's a linear. I don't think it's meant to be linear. It's kind of holographic, but better stages. And we can see these stages. That's a great thing about being in community. We can see these stages very clearly, and we kind of invent our own lines of development as appropriate. When we join the community, we all go through the stage of wanting to go to our room and close our door. That's a very clear stage. And we progress where we leave our door open a little bit. And then we progress by wanting to engage more voluntarily with more group activities and so on. That's just one kind of fun example, but there are lots. So I hope that gives you a taste for how we
well, thank you. I mean, I think that's very astute of your community, because as Ken points out in his book, none of the say axial religious traditions had any notion of stages. They were all around states. You believe in Jesus and you go to heaven, that kind of period. And it wasn't until about 100 years ago that the whole field of psychology began to develop, and we began to understand that individuals and cultures go through stages of development. And so that the state of mindfulness is a different tonality given wherever you are in your stage of development. And Ken Wilber's genius is that he really got this and is reframing the entire human epistemology about how we know what we know accordingly. So I just wanted to, bring that integration into the conversation as a way of just really applauding what you're doing, because I think, the Buddhist Sangha, everyone, is the longest continuous community in the world. There's no other community that even comes close to the Buddhist Sangha. And so they have a methodology honed over 2,600 years of a continuity that is worth studying deeply as we think about how we construct communities in a time of chaos. And then how you do it within an integral framework, which is sort of the latest information we humans have about how we humans operate, is you really have a rich mix there at Clear Sky. So I just want to acknowledge it and thank you all for, I would say the clarity. I'm very struck by the clarity with which you've articulated some of these issues. It's not easy to talk about money or sex or power. Even to talk about it is almost a taboo. So just kind of laying it out that these are the issues, folks, is certainly a step in the right direction. Because you have this other reality that there's no utopian communities that have endured. That's another piece of this. I'm a good friend of Michael Murphy's and the founder of Esalen. And Esalen has been going for, good 60 years now, plus. And over that time, and they had a different model, Catherine, than you folks, that have been more, say, a single tradition amalgamated with integral. Esalen built communities by having no boundaries on anything. And so that the problem that the challenge that Michael always had was, he said, his basic principle was not to let anybody capture the flag. Because over the course of the decade, the Beatles and Maharishi and then Bhagwan and this teacher and that teacher would roll into Esalen, and everybody would go into a little bit of a frenzy. And Michael was always the one to say, let the wave move and let the wave crest and then subside. But no one captures the flag here. So they've built the community on slightly different principles. But they're now really asking, after 18 months of COVID, whither Esalen as a community, and how and whether it's going to survive when no one can go there anymore. So that's another challenge for communities in the world. So you guys have taken on a real powerful challenge, and as you've been expressing it, we're doing extremely well.
Thank you, Jim. I think what you're saying speaks so well to the importance of diversity in different types of communities, different types of experiments, different types of centers. And so it's an open question that I put to everyone on this call. What are your values? What is important to you? And can you manifest that in the world? And can we support one another, find ways to support one another and honor the diversity that we bring to these burning questions?
Yeah. So, well, thank you. This is just an impulse, but Catherine, why don't you just give us just a brief closing benediction or any blessing that you would like to provide us as we close this out. It's been such a rich and, I would say, reverent session today. I just want to honor it by asking you to give us a closing blessing.
Thank you so much. We always like to honor all those who have gone before us, our teachers and all of our ancestors who have made it possible for us to be here, and helps us transcend this perceived barrier of space and time, and project that forward into the future. And we always offer everything we do for the benefit of all beings. Thank you so much for having us.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That's our session for today. You're all invited into the after chat session. Stanley just put the link in the chat box, and we'll see you here again tomorrow for our final session before we begin the 12-day program around what's happening in Glasgow with the Conference of Parties. So tomorrow will be framing and an exploration of what is at stake for the world for this COP in Glasgow starting next Monday. So thank you all. Bye for now.
Thank you. Shine your light.
Bye. Indeed. Bye-bye.